be able to feed all of these baby bees enormous amounts. When she's doing all this, she doesn't have time for anything else. She has a court. What does this court do? I just said what they did, but any ideas specifically?
I think it makes she gather up. She tells all the bees to gather up, and then and then she tells the bees what to do.
She does tell the bees what to do, but her court takes care of her. They clean her and groom her, and they make sure her hair is good and that she's healthy and strong. If she's not healthy and strong, they'll send an order out to the nurse bees to start building them a new queen, because they take care of her. And this, by the way, this red spot is not a real red spot. Why you can't see her abdomen is because it's down inside a cell. Now she has 3 parts to her, just like any other bee. She has a head, a thorax, and an abdomen, which is the long part. Now, why she has this abdomen is important. It has to hold all of those eggs. I told you 2,000 eggs a day. Well, it has to hold all of those eggs for that day. So she goes through an important development process. Does anyone know what makes her a queen rather than just a normal egg? She starts out like a normal egg. Idea of what makes her a queen. She starts out. While she grows up, she's fed something different. Now, all bees are given royal jelly for a portion of their life, about 3 days when they're a baby. But the queen is fed royal jelly for her whole life, this white stuff she's laying in. They literally float these baby bees in food to make sure that they're being fed. Now, she has to be able to eat all of that, and when she does, it makes her abdomen longer and makes her mature fully. Because all worker bees are queen bees, or could have been queen bees if they had been fed differently, because they're all females. The queen is just the only one developed enough to lay a female egg, which is very important. Yes?
So they just choose anything what to be the queen?
They choose any egg, normally lots of eggs.
It's like baby bees, when they come out, they're not small. They're just, they're just like adults. So it's they go into the egg and then they come out an adult thing.
Well, I'll cover that in a minute, but they actually go through a process of maturing inside the cell. But it doesn't take a very long time. And when they come out, they are a mature adult. Now, while she's surrounded by a court, I told you about that court, it's very important because they are young bees and they're able to produce the royal jelly. They produce it from a gland inside their head, and that's what she's fed. Many people take royal jelly as a medicinal substance. Medicinal meaning venomous. But I've never had to take it myself, although I have tasted it. It's pretty nasty, believe it or not. Anyhow, this is her companion. This is a drone bee. Now, what does the drone do?
Does nothing.
Very good. It does nothing. He mates with the queen. If he does, he dies immediately afterwards. The rest of the time,
He what's with the queen?
he mates with the queen, which means he's the dad. There's lots of dads in a hive. The queen will only mate once in her life. Now, a drone, during the day, will eat and sleep and rest. And about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he'll fly out to a high spot in the middle of sky over a field. And every single drone from miles around knows that spot is the right spot to be. We don't know how they know it, because they don't live from year to year to tell each other. But they know to fly out to this one particular spot, and they circle around, and they buzz around, and they talk to each other. And then a queen will come along, and they'll all fly after her. That's why they have their great big eyes. And they'll mate with her. And if they do, they die immediately afterwards. And if they don't, they'll go back to the hive, because it pulls out important organs. And if they don't, they'll go back to the hive, and they'll wait around until winter shows up, and then winter shows up. And what happens then?
They get kicked out.
They get kicked out. And if they try to come back, what happens then?
They die.
They get their wings chewed off. Yeah, they chew off their wings because they're trying to come back into the house. They're pretty mean to boys. It's not a good lot in life. It's because they're lazy. So don't ever be lazy. Be a hard worker and it won't ever happen to you. Now, a drone bee is particularly special because they're not able to sting. And beekeepers who are training will sometimes put them inside their veil and get used to them buzzing around. As long as they don't crawl in your ears, you put a bandana over your ears. That's awful. I haven't done it personally, but it's like, have any of you seen Tangled? where the lizard sticks its tongue into his ears and go, oh! Same thing with a bee, only it's interesting because a beekeeper has a reaction. Any person who has something like buzz by your ear and you go, whoa, it's natural to keep things away from your ears or your nose or your eyes. So that's one of the reasons a beekeeper wears a veil. But when they're wanting to train and get used to bees, they'll actually bring drug bees around because they can't sting. Worst they can do is crawl on you, and it's pretty creepy even then. But it's to get your body used to not getting the instinct to run away. Because if you get stung lots of times, your adrenaline will naturally say, run away! It's a natural reaction of your body to do that. So drones are good for that reason too. Not only that, but the way you identify a drone, and when we open up our beehive, you'll be able to see the drones. They have big eyes and they're fat and jolly, but otherwise they're built like a normal bee. They have 4 wings, they have 6 legs, but only 3 of them are available. Pollen baskets on their back legs. They have 5 eyes. Now, does anyone know where all of the eyes are? You can see 2 of them, right? Yes.
I think maybe on the side of the body, or like top, or like at the bottom.
They're all on the head. Any guesses? Yes.
Forehead.
Very good. Forehead. They have the 2 big compound eyes on the side of their head, and then they have 3 little eyes in the middle of their forehead. And I'll show a picture of a baby bee, and you'll be able to see the eyes on the top of it. Now this one is just emerged. You can see that he's wet all over, but bees have hair all over them. That's very important to their pollination process. This is a picture of the very same bee emerging. That's what it's called. When they chew out of their cell and they emerge. Now drone brood is also bigger than a normal female brood. Our queen brood is bigger. It's the size of a peanut almost. And this is the size of a small bullet. And a bee cell that is just for a normal, regular worker, you can fit 5 of them inside of an inch. So they're pretty small. This is which bee?
The queen, the baby,
Worker.
the queen and the drone.
There's one more. There's the queen, drone, and
Female.
well, she's a female, so is the queen. Worker, very good. She is the worker. Now, this is her doing a task. Can anyone name some tasks for me? Since you've heard this talk before, anyone name some tasks for me that they do? Yes.
They turn pollen into honey.
Not pollen, not exactly. They turn nectar into honey.
Yeah.
Anyone else? They clean, they guard, they do lots of things. This is a picture of bees transferring honey from one bee to the other. Because what you don't know is your honey has enzymes in it. Now, lots of bees have to give it. So they'll pass it from one bee to the next bee, to the next bee, to the next bee, until they finally start to put it in the cell. And then they'll have a bee that literally sits there and takes a drop of honey and roll it up and down their tongue. Roll it up and down their tongue again and again until it dries out to just the right texture and they put it in the cell. So it's a long process to make honey. Does anyone know how long it takes? How long does it take? Does anyone know? Never mind. It takes a while. It takes a couple of minutes, like 15 minutes or so. For a bee's life, that is long. Now, their first job that they'll do is not that job. They'll climb out of their cell and they'll get ready for the day and they'll dry off and eat something. First job that they do is they start by cleaning out a cell. So they get in there and they start scrubbing it out and they put this stuff called propolis on it, which is antibacterial and it keeps it clean. It also makes the comb darker. You'll be able to see right here that it's white, right? This is how you would see it like hanging on a tree. This is a wild type, or you see it inside a home. And these are the bees crawling all over it and they're taking care of these baby bees, which you can see the larvae in there, the little white jellies. Now, does anyone know the shape of a cell? It's a hexagon, like the shape of a stop sign. This is the shape of a cell, and bees are amazing construction workers. They'll actually make a circle, and it starts out as a circle, but because the wax is soft, it creates a tension on it, just like when you pull on a rope and it gets tight, and say if you had a bead on the end of that rope, it would pop up, right? Well, they create a wall, and that wall creates a tension, and that tension pulls the wax that's attached to the other side. It pulls it and creates that hexagonal shape, which is the strongest shape they could possibly make. So bees are amazing craftsmen. They know what they're doing. Now, you see this. This is, can anyone name the 3 stages of the bee?
Larva,
There's one more. Goes at the beginning. We're really close. Can anyone think of it? Egg, larva, pupa. You got 2 of them right. That's excellent. Egg starts out like that. After 3 days, the egg will begin to mature and it will lay down and it will hatch. And it will become a larva. And then it will become a pupa. Now, this is the picture I was talking about where you could see the eyes. You'll see the 3 eyes, the 3 black spots on the top of the head. Now, in a normal bee where they're fuzzing everything, you really can't see it. It's so small. But fortunately, this picture is blown up and you can see it. Egg starts out as a little white thing. They float the bee in nectar and then they have it grow. And this bee grows extremely fast. It'd be like seeing you next week suddenly being 6 feet tall. That's how fast a bee will grow. Can you imagine that? That'd be terrible. You'd start hitting yourself on all sorts of things like the freezer. Anyhow, you see the white jelly bean shape? It sits upright after a while. Yes, it looks like a funky white jelly bean. And then you'll see that it starts to look like a bee. And at this point, they cap it over. They cover it over with wax. They can breathe through this wax. It's not a problem. And then once they're fully matured, you were talking about that. Once they're fully matured, they come out and they chew through that. And that's when they're fully matured. They don't ever grow up past that point. They don't get bigger. They don't get smaller. They don't do anything past that. They will die, however. Bees in the summertime will only live about 3-4 weeks, depending on how hard they're working. In the wintertime, they'll live most of the winter. Just depends. Well, they do lots of other jobs. They keep house, they guard, they keep wasps out. In fact, there's a wasp in Japan that I'm going to tell you about how smart and inventive bees are. There's a wasp in Japan that will actually attack the bees in Japan because they eat them. They eat these bees. This is their food source, just like we would eat cows or chickens. So they come over and there's a scout bee or a scout wasp that comes in and looks at these bees. Now this only happens in Japan. These wasps are not in the rest of Europe or America or Asia. It's just in Japan. And these wasps come out and the bees see them and they'll actually cluster them and they'll get to them as fast as they can. And what they'll do is they'll start bringing up their heat, their temperature, by shivering. Because you know how people shiver when they're really, really cold? And that starts bringing up their heat. It's their body naturally trying to warm up. Or what bees do is they get close together, get close to someone. Aren't they warm? Aren't they a little warmer together? And then you shiver and you get really warm. Yeah. Okay, you guys can stop. But it feels so nice. It's warm to get close together, right? And bees will do that, and they'll cluster this big wasp. This is a big wasp. It could lop off their heads with just its mandibles, and they warm it up. Now this wasp dies at 2 degrees lower than they will die. When their heat rises too much, when your heat would rise too much, like baking something, it will actually kill it eventually. Yeasts are alive and they die in the bread because we bake it. And this wasp will start getting so hot that it dies of too much heat. And the bees are really close to that. They could almost die. But they're 2 degrees higher, so they don't. When they get off that wasp, as soon as it's dead, they get it out of the hive. Because if that wasp had gone back to its hive, it would have told all of its other brother wasps and would have come and killed the hive. Now, what's interesting is bees, they're different from place to place, just like you and I would be different from someone in China, how we think, how we act. And you take a beehive from America, and if you set them in Europe, within a couple of hours, those wasps would have killed and cleaned out that entire hive before that hive had a chance to learn that these wasps are so dangerous. So it's amazing how they've changed and how they've been designed to adapt to where they are. Now, this bee is fanning. I told you how they get close to shiver and get warm. They're the only insect that doesn't hibernate. You know, in the winter it gets cold. They get close together and they shiver. And they keep the temperature just perfect for the eggs because they have to have a perfect temperature, just like you would have to have a perfect temperature for chicks to hatch, right? And these bees, in the summertime, what do you think they do? You've heard this talk. What do they do to stay cool?
Shiver.
No, not shiver. That keeps them warm.
They stand themselves.
They what? Fan. Very good. They fan themselves. That's what this bee's doing. Her abdomen's up in the air. Her wings are going 1,000,000 miles a minute. Actually, not quite that fast, but they're going very, very fast. And she's fanning. They'll set up a system, and they're really smart. They'll set up an airflow system throughout the entire hive to bring cool air in and circulate hot air back out. Because there aren't any windows there they can open. I mean, when it's 100 degrees in the summer, you're looking for a popsicle in an air conditioning unit, right? Bees don't have that luxury, so they're incredibly inventive. Last job they do. You guys know what this is. This is pollen. Pollination and gathering up nectar, which gets turned into honey. Now, what do they do when they get on this flower? They do two things. Anyone remember? Yes. They bring their basket. They have their pollen basket right there. Anyone else? Yes?
They suck their honey out of the flower.
They do. It starts out as nectar, but yeah, it's honey.
They put the back of themselves in it and kind of collect the pollen on the back. I mean, not pollen, on nectar.
Like they get the nectar out and then they put it in a different flower and then.
Not quite, not quite. They don't put it in a different flower. They'll drop on the flower and they'll get the nectar, like you said, and they'll get the pollen all over themselves. And they bring their pollen baskets. They do all of that when they settle on this flower. They'll get pollen all over them. It just flies up when they do that. In fact, some flowers are incredibly smart. And they'll actually have a little trigger that when the bee walks into a flower, like a long tube flower, when the bee walks into a flower, it will trigger a little trip. And it will actually hit it on the back. Like a clover will hit it on the back with a bunch of pollen to make sure that its pollen gets onto that bee. And the bee doesn't like that. So eventually they'll learn to drill their way up through the flower. They're really creative. But they practice something called flower fidelity. Now this is what's so important to us as people, is they go from the same kind of flower all day long. They don't go from an apple blossom to a cherry blossom to an orange blossom. They don't do that. They pick one kind of flower to go to the entire time.
Their whole life or just for like.
Just for the day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, not for their whole life. They would die not having done a lot. But say blueberries. Anyone like blueberries? What about watermelons? Yeah, what about oranges? Ice cream. All right, you guys can get your hands right. Give me a moment, let me take a drink.
My dad can.
They help pollinate these things, and it's so important because when they do this, they drop onto the flower, the next flower, after they just got off one, and there's still pollen on them, and it drops off onto the flower and creates a fruit, which creates more seeds, which creates fruits and vegetables for us, like cucumbers and watermelons. A watermelon has to be visited 50 times to be able to produce an actual watermelon. It doesn't necessarily have to be by a bee, but because so many people are spraying stuff, it kills a lot of the native insects that would do that anyway. Not only that, but there are these massive crops covering miles, massive crops so that we can have great food all year round. And if the natural insects, because they're wild bees, those natural insects can't always get to all of that. It's too big. And I said ice cream. Now, does anyone remember why I said ice cream? Talked about it last time. Well, long and short of it is they pollinate something called alfalfa. Does anyone know what alfalfa is fed to? Yep, very good, cows. It goes moo. And they eat alfalfa, and when they eat alfalfa, they produce milk, and milk gets turned into what?
Ice cream.
Ice cream and butter and cheese and all of these things that are important for us. So bees even help with our dairy products. Well, they do all of this, and they are the only insects on Earth that are created to make a product for man. And it's just amazing. Anyone recall what this is?
You said it earlier.
I said it earlier, yes. Pollen, very good. You guys can pass it. You can see a couple of the different colors. Now, pollen comes in all colors. You've seen the blue bonnets outside, right?
Yeah.
Those blue bonnets produce a bright red pollen. I've seen black pollen and gray pollen and purple pollen. It comes in all shades and colors. It just depends on what plants you're getting it from. Not only that, but we know honey. We love honey, right?
I love honey.
Yeah, you guys can look at that. That is crystallized honey.
What's that? It's like, what's crystal?
Crystallized honey is when the honey has been in the jar for a while and it starts protecting itself. It starts preserving itself by turning itself into pretty little crystals.
Yeah.
And you can actually whip it and make creamed honey, and it's quite good. You can make it firm like butter. Now, you can not only do that, but it stays good forever. It's antibacterial. Does anyone remember what that means? Antibacterial.
Is it the stuff that cleans your hands?
You're very close to right. It cleans off the germs from your hands. But, like hand sanitizer, but antibacterial means it just doesn't let any bacteria in. It doesn't let in with the stuff that makes you sick or gives you bad breath.
So it's better than what we use?
Well, I don't suggest washing your hands in honey. That's pretty nasty. And it's expensive, yes.
So you could buy honey and then you could let it sit in there and it'll crystallize. And
It will. It's antibacterial before it
How
crystallizes.
can you tell?
so then you'll have like crystals and you could just make it.
You can whip it, yes, yes.
How can you tell when it's crystallized?
When it's crystallized is when it's firm like that. The bubble does not go up and down. Like normally, if you take a honey jar and you turn it upside down, there's a bubble that goes up to the top. Or with a water bottle. Well, not much water. Never mind. But
Megan, it's hard. It's crystallized means it's hard.
yes, when you turn it upside down and it's not crystallized, there's a bubble that will go up. Not only that, but you can feel the jar. You can squish it a little. It's plastic, and you can feel that it's stiff. It's not a liquid anymore. It's stiff. You can spoon it out, and it's interesting in that way. They found it in King Tut's tomb and they ate it afterwards. And the Egyptians made honey.